I have so many books to talk about today, and I'm not a huge book buying person, so hopefully this will last us for a while. Ready? Wait. Okay, I don't think that was actually as satisfying as I wanted it to be. Hello everybody, welcome back to my book channel. This is my fun little hobby space where I talk about books. I have my spindrift, my book haul, and we're ready to go. So I've mentioned this on my channel before, but I'm not actually a huge fan of buying a bunch of physical books. This is actually the first time I've accumulated this many books to share. Normally I read a lot on my Kindle. I'll check books out from the library, and I try to do my best that when I buy a book, I read that book. But I've had some extreme luck at like thrift stores, or like my friends finding me books or getting gifted things, or just being a sucker and buying certain things. So without further ado, let's get into the books that I have accumulated recently. And yeah, I'm so excited to talk about all these. Okay, so I'm just gonna get this series out of the way. It's like the main book series that I actually like intentionally purchased. I did buy the entire acotar series. This book is out because I'm currently reading it. I'm actually almost done with it. And I did a video on my channel recently where I did a reading vlog for the first book. Now, I've actually read Sarah J. Maas's writing before. I read the first part of the Throne of Glass series and love her writing, so I didn't want to like buy one book and then not have the rest to get through. And I'm loving this so far. But for anyone who is not familiar with acotar, otherwise known as A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, it is a really fun and wild fantasy story that also has heavy romantic plots in it. And it basically starts out with this human girl named Feyre who is living in the dead of winter, and she's trying her best to provide for her family. But one thing leads to another, and she ends up getting swept off into the Fey realm. And we get to watch our main girl kind of grapple with the decision that she makes in the very beginning of the story. I will say it starts a little bit slowly in my opinion, but it does pick up. The second half was chef's kiss. This book is like a 6-star so far if it doesn't destroy me at the very end. And then I'm very excited to read the rest. So yeah, that is my first 5 books of this book haul. Okay, moving on to my next stack. So my next few books in here are actually rereads. So my sister, she actually also has a book channel. She and I are doing this together, so if you guys want to go subscribe to her, I'll link her channel down below. But she knows that my favorite romance author is Emily Henry. And I've been reading Emily Henry, I would say, since the beginning. Like, I read Beach Read when it came out. I read People We Meet on Vacation when it came out, and Book Lovers when it came out, so I mostly bought them on my Kindle, or in the case of Beach Read, I borrowed it from my roommate. And her newest release, Happy Place, I read on my Kindle. And my sister was at the thrift store and found each of these books for, I think, like $1 or $2. And she already had copies of them, and she was like, "Do you want them?" Of course I wanted them. So she picked these up for me, and I'm so happy. Like I said, they're all by Emily Henry. My favorite of them is probably Beach Read. Now, if you're interested in a little romance this summer, these 3 books are definitely where I would probably recommend that you go first. Beach Read is so good. It's about these 2 authors named Augustus and January. Yeah, named Augustus and January. And basically both of them hit this like writing slump, and they switch genres. So Augustus has to write romance, and January has to write like mystery or contemporary or whatever his genre is. This book is one of the books that made me really love reading again. It's so summery, it's so beautiful, it's so deep. So I highly recommend reading this if you're interested. Up next, we have People We Meet on Vacation, which is another beautiful romance story. It goes back and forth between two different timelines. It's these two friends and they went on the same trip together every single year. But our book starts out 10 years, I think, 10 years in the future, and they're no longer going on this trip. It's really, really good. Not my favorite of hers, but really, really good. And also totally summery. Takes place in Palm Springs or Palm Desert. Gosh, it's been a little while, you guys. Don't know, but it's very summery vibes. Then lastly, we have Book Lovers. Also highly recommend this. The reason that I love this romance story is because it starts out so different than any romance story I've ever read. I won't dive into this too deeply just so we can get to the rest of the books. Don't want to take up your guys' entire afternoon. But Book Lovers is really fun because it starts out, I think it's in the prologue, our main girl named Nora, queen that she is, she starts out being like, I'm that girl in every romance story that the guy leaves for that cutesy small town girl, right? She's like, I am the like successful in my stilettos like city girl that all these guys are leaving, and all her ex-boyfriends have left her for this same like type of character, type of girl. And so she ends up going to this small town with her sister because of a book that she is editing, I think. And in this small town, romance ensues with someone who may or may not be from the city with her. Also, both our main girl and the guy work in like the book industry and publishing. So if you're interested in, again, more summery vibes and like book vibes, this is definitely the way to go. But yeah, my favorite is Beach Read and her new release, Happy Place. So I am just really excited to have physical copies of these books. I think they're so good and they look so cute together. Like putting all of these on my shelf and not just living in my Kindle. I'm so excited. Move up the books that I haven't talked about yet. Okay, this next book has been towards the top of my TBR for actually the longest time. Every time I go to Target, it just stares at me and begs me to buy it, and I resist. But I went to my local thrift store recently and I had a few fantastic finds. And at this thrift store, paperbacks are like $2.99. It's actually insane. And I found a pristine copy of The House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I have been absolutely dying to read this for years and I'm so excited that I have it now. But The House on the Cerulean Sea is about this old man named Linus Baker. I feel like I've heard so many people talk about this book, so I'm like, I think it's Linus. And he works for the Department of Magical Youth. And so it's basically his job to keep an eye on the magical children. And one day he gets requested, or he needs to go to this island, I think, with 6 magical children who are like potentially too dangerous and could be the end of time and earth and space and everything. And my understanding is that he's a really grumpy old little man, and he gets kind of broken down and ends up being a really sweet story. And I love fantasy and all that good stuff. And again, this copy, the spine is beautiful. The pages are gorgeous. I'm so excited to read this. I'm actually traveling soon and this might be the book I bring with me because these are simply too large to travel with me. So yeah, The House on the Cerulean Sea is the next one. This next series I mentioned in a video recently, and it's another reread. I did notice that in this book haul specifically, I did get lucky finding some physical copies of books that I've already read, which is actually really good for this video because I can give you a good description of what the books are about versus like kind of guessing from the back. But the next series that I'm going to be talking about is the Selection series, and I have already read this. This was like one of my childhood favorite series ever growing up. I absolutely loved this book series. America Singer, the main girl in it, was like my idol. I thought she was so cool when I read it for the first time. And this series is Lily's favorite series. She reads it like twice a year. And so again, on a separate day, I went to this same thrift store. It like is super close to me, so I just go all the time and peek in the book section. And I found all three of the books, the Selection, the Elite, and the One. Usually when you go to the thrift store, I feel like you'll find one book from the series versus like all of them. And again, for all of these, it was $9. A bargain, and it looks like they've never been read. So I did recently do a reread of the Selection, and I don't know if you can see that, but I did tab it with like my favorite parts, and I'm so excited to continue on to the Elite because it was just as good as I remember. But if you have been eyeing, oh boy, eyeing the Selection, it's basically the way that most people will describe this series is a combination of like The Bachelor, but then like in a dystopian reality, if that makes sense. So the premise is there's this dystopian world and everyone is divided into castes, and the ones are like royalty, and I think eights are like the bottom, like they do all the dirty work, and each number, each caste has certain jobs and it's associated with wealth and all that kind of stuff. And so the royalty in this world, when it's time for the prince to marry, they hold something called the Selection. And during the Selection, 35 girls get picked from all of the castes in their kingdom to go to the castle and basically compete for the king's hand, right? They want to find love or whatever. And America Singer, our main girl, she does not want to be there. She's like, my application got picked by mistake. I already have a boyfriend at home, all that good stuff. And let's just say that things get crazy. And so the entire series goes through the entire selection process. So this starts out with all the girls, and then less, and then less, and I think you get the idea. Definitely YA breezy reads, but they just hold such a nostalgic place in my heart that I had to buy them and reread them. So yeah, that is The Selection by Kiera Cass. Next up, I have The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I'm realizing now that there is a lot of romance in here, and I didn't intend to do that. Normally I have a huge range, but here we are. The next book that I have is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This has been recommended to me by a lot of people, and I feel like it was really popular a few years ago. I still haven't gotten to it. This was another thrift store find. It's so popular, I felt like why not just grab it, pick it up for a quick summer romance. And this is basically about two people who hate each other, love good, enemies to lovers vibes, and they ultimately have to compete for the same job. And my understanding is that they sabotage each other a lot, and the romance ensues. This was also turned into a movie kind of recently, or maybe it was a few years ago now. I don't know, but this just seemed like a fun, quick romance, and I feel like summer is the perfect season for romance novels. And I'm curious to see what I think of Sally Thorne, because I feel like generally I hear pretty good things about her. Sorry guys, I'm trying to make it so this can be cute and you can see all the books at once. But I am excited to like give it a shot myself and make up my own opinion. Okay, we only have a few more left, and regrettably or not, we're not quite leaving the romance genre yet, but the last two are very different. This next one, you've all seen this before, is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I have now read 2 Colleen Hoover books. I've read November 9th and Confess, and I really loved both of them. So I felt like it was probably time to read arguably her most famous piece of literature, that being It Ends With Us. This is about relationship abuse and how our main character, Lily, she meets this guy who at first seems really great. And then through the story, you start to see how someone who at first is a great guy maybe isn't. And so this was also a gift from my sister. Thank you, Lily. If you're watching this, you're the best. And I'm really excited to read this, but I do feel like it needs to be picked up at the right time. Like this isn't something I can just like breeze through, you know? It's not just a fun little read. So I'm trying to time this one well. But yeah, that's It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Not going to talk about this too much because I do feel like most people are at least familiar with it. So, okay, the next book that I have is Anxious People by Friedrich Bachmann. And not only this name, but this title was going around again for like everywhere like a year or two ago, I feel like. And it was a book that I'd heard good things about and I just never got around to it. But on one of my walks in the library, the little free library had this book and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna snag it. And don't worry friends, I do put books in the little free library. Do not fret. And so Anxious People, not a romance, I think, is about, I think it's kind of like a quirky little mystery story. It's basically about these people are like taken hostage at a real estate event or something like that. Don't quote me on this. And throughout the story, you kind of realize that there's more than what meets the eye to each of these hostages, including like the guy who takes them hostage or something like that. And apparently it's like really funny and really good or something like that. So I was like, it's in a little free library. I've thought about this book many times. I'm just gonna snag it. So yeah, let me know if you guys have read this, because I am pretty excited to get to this one. Whoa, we're at the last book and then it circles back down to Emily Henry. Now the last book that I picked up is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. I have again already read this book. This is a non-fiction book about, I mean, it says it perfectly on the cover. It's a brief history of humankind. I actually convinced my boyfriend to read this, so he just bought his own copy and is now reading this. But to anyone who is only familiar with me from this book channel, I actually have a second channel that's my main channel called Anthropology by Olivia, where I make videos about anthropology every week. And that's been in my life for the last like 3 years, whereas this channel is relatively new and more of a hobby. I'm treating it way more casually. And Sapiens is, in my opinion, one of the best informal introductions to the field of anthropology, because it isn't written for anthropologists. It's just like, are you interested in humans and how we humans got to where we are today? It's really great for any skill level, any background in history or humans or whatever. And I love this book. I also just read Homo Deus by the same author. That was also very good. So yeah, this was one that like I borrowed a copy from my roommate in college. I talk about it in videos all the time and I was like, I have to just get this. It's not in the best shape, you could probably tell. It's like, yeah, it's like kind of bent and stuff like that. But again, I just talk about it so often. I thought it'd be kind of nice to have a physical copy to hold. And for anyone who has read this, it's a freaking heavy book. Those were all of the books that I have recently accumulated. Now you guys can try to hold me accountable on this, but I'm not planning on purchasing any more books anytime soon. Normally, I'm literally like this year, I had like 6 physical books that I owned but hadn't read yet, and then I read all of those and then this happened. So let me know if you guys have any books in here that you've been wanting to read, or like if you have read any of these. A lot of us have talked about acotar in the comments and that's been really fun. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful for everybody, and I don't know, I'm just having such a fun little time with this booktube channel. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys when I see you. All right, you guys, bye.